Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast with the Ignatian Solidarity Network. My name is Chris Kerr, Executive Director of ISN, and we're excited to bring to you today this Witness from the Border program, which is part of our ongoing ISN live work. If you're online, welcome to this live broadcast. If you're with us online on Facebook or Twitter, thanks for joining us. You can share a message or a question using the hashtag ISN Live. Again, that's ISN Live on Twitter, or just make a comment in the Facebook feed there, right there on your Facebook window or on your phone. We're excited to welcome a number of guests with us today. Here today, we have Jesuit Father Sean Carroll, the Executive Director of the Kino Border Initiative, Joanna Williams, the Director of Education Advocacy at the Kino Border Initiative, as well as Vince Herberbold, who is a parishioner and a member of the Peace and Justice Commission at St. Joseph Parish, which is a Jesuit parish in Seattle, Washington. We're going to turn things right over to Father Sean Carroll, who's going to share with us some important perspectives on the work of the Kino Border Initiative at the U.S.-Mexico border and how that work has been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. So welcome, Father Carroll. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for this opportunity to talk to everyone via Facebook Live and to the Ignatian Solidarity Network. As many, if not all of you know, we work here in Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. The Kino Border Initiative, bi-national ministry focused on humanitarian assistance, education, research, and advocacy. Obviously, during these weeks, the COVID-19 crisis has affected us deeply, and the migrants that we serve as well. And so we have modified some of our services in response to that reality. We continue to serve here. We're serving one meal a day. We're in our new center. That's the great news. But we've limited one meal a day just for the sake of taking appropriate precautions. So we're serving food in the morning and then giving people enough food for the afternoon as well. We're continuing to offer legal assistance in our collaboration with the Florida's Immigrant Refugee Rights Project, but we're doing that virtually, and so we have people come in one at a time, and they receive those consultations via computer from legal assistants and an attorney in Tucson, Arizona. And we continue to work on advocacy as well. We had a press release come out some days ago, really expressing our deep concern about expedited returns of migrants and really the importance that everyone have access in the midst of this crisis. And so we continue to work here on the border. We continue to work bi-nationally, and we continue to fulfill our mission. And the migrants continue to inspire us as well by their perseverance, by their strength, getting up every day in the midst of all the uncertainty that they're experiencing, and they give us great hope.
Father Sean, can you talk just a little bit about, I think all over the country we're trying in the world, really, we're trying to find ways to still be present to people, but also trying to social distance ourselves. How does that work? I mean, your ministry there at the U.S.-Mexico border, it's a ministry of encounter. Can you talk a little bit about, you said you've kind of shifted to one meal a day. Can you talk about some of the changes maybe your staff have had to make, or changes you've had to make in terms of the ways that volunteers can serve there at the Comodore in Nogales?
Yeah, it's been really challenging. I mean, it's mostly our staff, very few volunteers. Our long-term volunteers, we need to send home for just for the sake of just their safety and as a precautionary measure. As you say, our ministry really is one of encounter, and I really credit the missionary sisters of the Eucharist of really bringing that spirit of hospitality, and the sisters in general who work on our staff, that spirit of hospitality, that spirit of care, that spirit of as we call it in the Society of Jesus, cura personalis, that care of the person, and that is really a part and parcel of the Kino Border Initiative. So how do we do that? And in this reality, and that's a major challenge we face. But I think we recognize that it's important the migrants are safe. It's important that our staff is safe. And so I think we continue to serve with that care and support. We do wear hospital masks. We do wear gloves when we serve. The migrants, they're bringing their own dishes generally, and if they don't have them, we provide them for them. But we have them come up one at a time. We're serving outside. We have 2 stations where people come, and so it's really trying to find that balance to continue to be faithful to that core part of our identity, but also assure the safety of everyone concerned.
And how about some of those auxiliary services that your new center really, was set up for, the legal services, counseling, social work, things like that. And also, how do you minister and be present to children that might be coming to the center as well?
Sure. So we're not sheltering anyone yet, and because of concerns about the virus, and I'd say very, very limited first aid. But the children, family members are coming, and I'd say for the most part, with some exceptions, children are staying at home. And so family members come and they receive food from us, not only for themselves, but also for their families. And so I think we've had to limit our services, I think, significantly, and for obvious reasons, out of concern for the safety of everyone. But in fact, this morning we were handing out care packages or packets with pirate booty and just food that children would like, and asking how many children does the family have, and then giving them those number of care packages. And so even though we can't gather the children together and I think really offer programming particularly focused on them, we're trying to provide something particularly for them in the midst of these challenging times.
Thanks, Father. We're going to turn to Joanna Williams, the Director of Education Advocacy at the Kino Border Initiative, to share a little bit about the changing realities of U.S. and Mexican policy there at the border and how that's affecting people on the ground, the people that the Kino Border Initiative serves there in Nogales, Sonora. Joanna, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here and for joining us. Just your attention to what's happening at the border. I think we're deeply concerned about how this moment is this real public health emergency is being taken advantage of to reduce access to asylum, to make life more difficult for asylum seekers who are in Nogales, Mexico, and really along the northern border. And I wanted to talk about 3 policies, which you may or may not have heard about, that are particularly affecting folks in Nogales. One is, as we've talked about in other sessions, the Remain in Mexico policy. So under Remain in Mexico, people who are detained crossing and who ask for asylum, if they're not Mexican, they're sent back to Mexico to wait for their court dates in the United States in order to seek asylum. So we have many people who have been returned to Nogales and told that they have a court date. They were returned in January and were told they had a March court date or an April court date. Well, now, not only is that policy in general putting people into homelessness and uncertainty for months and maybe years, but now with the coronavirus, all of their court dates have been canceled. Yet the US government is still requiring them to show up on the day and the place that they were supposed to show up at before in order to just get a piece of paper that has their new court date. And this has a really deep impact because people who are returned to Nogales are supposed to show up in Juarez, which is 10 hours away. So they're supposed to take a bus for 10 hours, a crowded public bus. The shelters in Juarez aren't accepting any new people. And yet somehow they're supposed to show up there in order to just get a piece of paper that says that they have a new court date. This is a very solvable problem. We could be giving people pieces of paper here in Nogales instead of in Juarez. But instead we're exposing people to additional public health risk, to additional homelessness and suffering, just for a bureaucratic reason. So that's the first policy that's affecting people and causing a lot of anxiety, and actually something that Christian is going to speak about in a little bit because he's been affected by it. The second is the closure of the border, and that's having 2 impacts. There's 2 dimensions of that policy. So the border was closed to quote unquote non-essential travel. Well, from the Kino Border Initiative's perspective, seeking asylum, fleeing for your life is essential travel. Unfortunately, the US government doesn't see it that way. And what they've done is they've stopped processing asylum seekers altogether who have been waiting for months to present at the port of entry. So we've had people who arrived here in January and this is now their 4th month of being in Nogales, and they have wanted to turn themselves in. They want to present at the port of entry. They still haven't been processed. And now it looks like they might have to wait indefinitely in Nogales. And this includes people who are really fleeing very dramatic violence here in Mexico, who are at risk because of this amount of time that they're waiting. Then we're at our aid center, if you can't tell, so there's a lot going on in my background. And then the third policy, which is related to this end to asylum, is what are called rapid expulsions. So it used to be that when somebody was across the border, they would process them and they would see, does this person have an asylum claim? What's going on with their situation? If somebody crosses the desert now, they're just being turned back and sent back to Mexico immediately. And that means actually that most people aren't even being returned to Nogales. They're being returned to smaller ports of entry. So a small town called Sasabe, which is basically one street, has now received dozens of people being deported, and it doesn't have civil society infrastructures. It doesn't have a migrant shelter. There's nowhere for these people to arrive when they're being turned around. That's why Nogales is designated as the port of repatriation, because we can provide a little bit more services. But now people are being sent to these really dangerous and really under-resourced towns along the border under this rapid expulsion policy. So those are three policies that are affecting folks: the change in court dates, this stopping of processing of asylum seekers, and the rapid expulsion of people back to Mexico.
Now, Joanna, in a statement the Kino Border Initiative released a couple weeks ago, they talked about some of these policy changes that are happening there at the border. And they noted that these are not, the trajectory of these policies are not really new to border policy. Could you talk a little bit about how you see this as part of a kind of a larger trajectory related to border policy over the past few years?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we really think that the government is taking advantage of this crisis, but this isn't necessarily in the best interest of public health. And we say that in part because of what we've observed in the last several years. So what we've observed is this policy of metering, where people are made to wait in Mexico just to start their asylum claims. That's been in effect for a long time, and now it's becoming worse. Remain in Mexico is in effect, and now it's becoming worse. So it's really this long tradition that the administration has had of reducing access to asylum, that this new policy is just, this new announcement is just building on, and really the final blow, I would say, to access to asylum at the border.
And Joanna, I mean, asylum, I think it would be easy to say so many things in society right now are kind of on hold. I think that, many could say, well, shouldn't we put asylum on hold, out of a concern for public health and safety? But can you talk a little bit about why we need to see asylum differently, that we need to see asylum as an essential need?
So when people are seeking asylum, it's literally a matter of life and death. I was speaking with somebody the other day that they had just arrived in Nogales a week ago because their house was shot up. If organized crime came through and shot their house. So that's really a matter of, they need to find immediate safety. Just like all of us want to preserve our health in this moment of the public health crisis, that's exactly what asylum seekers are seeking for slightly different circumstances. So this is just as essential as going to the grocery stores. We haven't closed access to food, nor also should we close access to asylum.
Sure, that's great. Maybe it would be helpful to hear from someone who's experiencing the MPP or the Remain in Mexico program. I know we have Christian there with us. So why don't we welcome Christian to share a little bit of his personal story.
Buenas. ¿Qué tal?
Buenas. Bien, bien.
Bueno, mi nombre es Cristian Rápalo, soy de Honduras, ¿verdad? Estoy aquí con mi hija. Venimos huyendo de la violencia, venimos huyendo de la inseguridad que está viviendo en Honduras y muchos problemas sociales que tenemos allá. Entonces, hemos venido desde Honduras atravesando Guatemala, México y estamos aquí esperando para una corte.
My name is Christian, and I'm here with my daughter. We came from Honduras. And we fled here because of the violence in Honduras, the insecurity, the societal problems that we're experiencing there. And in order to get here, we traveled through Guatemala, we traveled through Mexico, and now we're here in Mexico and we're waiting for our court dates.
En el tiempo que hemos estado aquí, las personas nos han tratado bien, pero hemos sentido que el tiempo que hemos estado es muy largo. Estamos aquí desde el 17 de febrero y nuestra corte toca el 29 de abril, ¿verdad? Y estamos en un país que no conocemos a personas, donde encontrar trabajo es muy difícil, y más si se anda con un joven menor de edad, que no hay con quién dejarlo o con quien pueda cuidar al joven. También la inseguridad que se vive muchas veces de salir a la calle o estar pendientes de qué nos va a pasar en el transcurso del día.
So while we've been here, you know, some people have treated us well, but it's been a very long time that we've been here. We've been here since February 17th, and our court date isn't scheduled until April 29th. And it's difficult to be in a country for so long, to be in a country where we don't know anybody. It's hard to get work, especially hard to get work with, you know, if you're coming with a young child like I am, because I don't have anyone to leave her with if I was to go out and work. And there's also this insecurity that we experience where we don't feel safe going out on the streets. So that's made this time challenging.
Y en estos días hemos estado en bastante zozobra, que no sabemos qué va a pasar con nosotros, ya que con esta pandemia que tenemos, el Estado está en cuarentena, ¿verdad? El país está en cuarentena, y nosotros entramos al albergue tarde, a las 6 de la tarde, y salimos a las 8 de la mañana, pero realmente ahora no sabemos dónde podemos estar, porque la Policía Nacional, la Guardia Nacional nos llega a sacar de parques, de canchas, porque el país está en cuarentena y no podemos estar reunidos y no podemos regresar también al albergue temprano.
And now with this situation with the pandemic, it's particularly challenging because we don't know, or we're particularly worried because we don't know where to go. We have, in the shelter that we're staying in, we can get to the shelter at 6 p.m., but then we have to leave at 8 a.m. So we can't be in the shelter during the day. And wherever we go, the police and the National Guard kick us out of the parks or of different places that we are because the state's under quarantine. But we don't know where we could go in this time if we're not in the shelter, and we're not allowed to be in the parks. There's nowhere else for us.
Entre nosotros hay de muchas nacionalidades, hay hondureños, guatemaltecos, salvadoreños, mexicanos, y todos estamos con esa idea de llegar allá, cumplir nuestro sueño americano, pero también hay un montón de cosas, como decíamos, que no podemos estar, no podemos estar afuera ahorita, y hay personas que andan con niños pequeños, menores de edad, niños de brazos, ¿verdad? Y tenemos el miedo del contagio o de cualquier otra cosa así. Nos estamos preparando para ir a la corte nosotros el 29 de abril, pero tenemos que costear nuestros pasajes hasta Ciudad Juárez. Es aproximadamente de 10 a 12 horas de aquí, ¿verdad? Y tenemos que ver cómo nos movilizamos hasta allá para llegar a la corte y presentarnos.
So amongst us, there's many people from Honduras and from El Salvador and from other places. And there's many people who have small children and even who are carrying babies in their arms and don't have a place to be during the day. And moreover, we're also looking towards our court dates. You know, we have a court date scheduled on April 29th. We're supposed to go to Juárez, and we're looking at the price of those bus tickets that we need to travel to Juárez. I forgot to mention, he also said, we're really worried for the health of our families as we're out and about. We're worried about the kids that we're carrying in our arms, and are they going to get sick? But then we also have to look at the price of those tickets to Juárez. ¿Cuánto me dijiste que son los boletos? So it's around 1,200 or 1,500 pesos, or maybe we can get a discount for 800 pesos, but that's like more than $40 per person. Y no sé si puedes decir si como ya se van a cambiar.
Pues realmente para nosotros que lleguen a cambiar una corte tiene un impacto tal vez moral o tal vez un poco mental para nosotros, porque realmente estábamos preparándonos para movernos para el 29. Si nos las cambian sería un poco más de espera, donde nosotros no podemos movilizarnos y buscar un buen trabajo aquí o cómo mantenernos realmente. Es muy difícil para nosotros estar en esta situación, pues, y llegar a un lugar y que nos dijeran que van a extenderla 2 meses más, 3 meses más, es como nos desanima o nos preocupa más porque no podemos alcanzar lo que nosotros deseamos.
Now it appears that they might be changing their courts. The courts are changing. You know, that's really having a moral, an impact on our morale here, because we've been trying to live here. We've been struggling to find work, to support ourselves, to travel, and we're now preparing to make this trip to Juarez, but then to find out that we might have to wait longer, that it might be another 2 months, it might be another 3 months. You know, that really discourages us to have to face that long time. ¿Algo más que quieres decir?
Well, thank you, Christian, for sharing. I'd be just to help folks who are throughout the United States understand what you're experiencing. Could you talk a little bit about what it is like for your family day to day? You described a little bit of it, leaving the shelter and not being able to return to the shelter. But can you give us an understanding of a typical day right now for you and your family?
Pues un día normal nosotros levantarnos siempre como tipo 7 de la mañana, 7:30, limpiar, arreglar el lugar donde nosotros nos quedamos en el albergue, ¿verdad? Y salimos a las 8 de la mañana, 8:30, y llegamos aquí al comedor Kino, hacemos la fila para la comida, luego nos movemos hacia una cancha, ¿verdad? Para poder comer ahí tranquilos, porque no podemos movernos a otro lado, ¿verdad? No hay suficiente espacio para donde se pueda estar porque nos llegan a sacar. Y después de eso, estar ahí o recorrer la ciudad para poder estar en otro tiempo afuera, haciendo alguna otra actividad, y llegar a las 6 de la tarde al albergue, donde llegamos a las 6, que está abierto, y podemos estar ahí de nuevo en el albergue hasta las 10 que nos dormimos y volver a empezar el día.
So in a typical day, we wake up at 7:30. We'll clean our spaces, you know, organize things, and then by 8 we'll leave the shelter. We'll come down to Kino's comedor. We'll walk down here and then wait in line for the food. And then when we get our food, then we'll go down to a field, because that's the only place that we're allowed to be, is in this field area. It's the only place they won't kick us out of. So then we can eat our meals there, and then maybe we'll just stay there, or maybe we'll walk around the city to pass time. Maybe there's something else we could do. And then return to the shelter at 6 to then go to sleep around 10, and then can start the day over again. No se escucha.
And Christian, if you could share just a little bit. Sometimes people will say, well, if a person is going to be in Mexico for a while, they can just find a job and work, and it'll be okay. Is that true?
El trabajo sí existe, hay bastante trabajo, pero no es muy bien remunerado. El sueldo es bajo, estamos hablando de 200 pesos al día, 250, donde tiene que comprar un plato de comida que vale 60, gastar unos 14 o 20 lempiras en pasajes diarios, ¿verdad? Entonces su sueldo no rinde, número uno. Y número dos, para las personas que vienen solas, sí. Yo vengo con una niña de 13 años, que ¿con quién la puedo dejar? Una niña que si no se le puede confiar a otra persona, porque es una menor y porque es una mujer, ¿verdad? Entonces, para uno que viene con una persona así, no es fácil encontrar trabajo y que le digan sí puede traer a su hijo. Eso es muy difícil para hacer.
So sure, there is a lot of work in Mexico, but the problem is that it's not very well paid. So if I got a job here and I got paid maybe 200 pesos a day, well, I'd spend 60 pesos just on food, 15 pesos just on travel to and from work. I think it is reasonable for somebody who's traveling alone to be able to get work in Mexico. But in my case, I'm traveling with my daughter, and she's a minor. She's 13 years old, and she's also a woman. She's a girl, and I don't have anybody to leave her with. And I don't want to just leave her alone because she is still very young and she is a girl. And it would be very difficult for me to find a workplace that would actually let her come along because of her age. So there's really nothing for me to do because of I'm not traveling alone, because I'm traveling with my daughter. That makes it harder.
And Christian, before we close, maybe really quickly, you left your home, you left your home country. You've come on this journey with your daughter. What are your hopes? Why are you enduring this great struggle, particularly what you're experiencing now amidst the pandemic? Why are you doing this?
Realmente uno lo hace pensando en los hijos, pensando en la familia, pensando en las personas que sobreviven aparte de uno. Realmente es un gran sacrificio que lo hace, pero para que los hijos puedan tener una vida mejor, para que las personas que están, que uno es parte de uno es ayuda al sustento, puedan tener un mejor futuro, ¿verdad? Esperamos, mi idea siempre ha sido llegar, trabajar, esforzarme y que mis hijos sean unas personas con un mejor futuro que el que nosotros tenemos, ¿verdad? Eso siempre ha sido así.
So really the reason that we do this is our kids, to be able to give them a better life, because we make this sacrifice, we go through these difficult times, but it's so that our kids can have a better future. That's my dream, is that I'd be able to get there, that I'd be able to work, that I'd be able to really put in that effort, and that my kids could have a different kind of future.
Thank you, Christian, for so much for sharing your story and your situation there. As a father of three boys, I have a tremendous amount of respect for your what you just shared, because I think all of us who are parents, and any of us who remember how our parents cared for us when we were children, we would do the same things. And so please know that we are with you in solidarity, and finding ways to do what we can here in the United States to help our country see different ways of responding to the needs of those at the border, those who are seeking asylum, and we're with you. And with that, I think we'll turn it over to St. Joseph's Parish in Seattle, Washington, and Vince Herberholt, who is going to share a little bit about the ways that St. Joseph's Parish has walked with people like Christian and others who come to the U.S.-Mexico border, or who have been deported and are getting support and accompaniment from the Kino Border Initiative. St. Joseph's Parish has had the chance to go to Nogales, Sonora, and be part of the work of Kino. So we're going to turn it over to Vince to share some brief reflections on that work happening at St. Joseph's Parish in Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Vince.
Okay. Good to be with you all, and I bring you greetings from the 1,700 households in our parish and from the 10 amazing people in our Kino immersion delegation. Before I get into our actual response, I just wanted to say that the immersion offered by Kino is just amazing. Every member of our delegation was transformed and is committed to building a community of solidarity and advocacy for our neighbors at the border. As you can imagine, we did all the normal stuff when we returned from Nogales. We made a presentation at the parish. We did a special collection. We raised over $5,000. And by the way, I want to say that the check is now in the mail. You should be receiving it shortly. So look forward to that. And we put a link on our website to the Kino wish list. And people are starting to purchase things and send them direct to Kino. Here's what we've accomplished so far. I wish it was more, to tell you the truth. As a delegation, we've shared our experience beyond the parish with our congressional staffs, state representatives, archdiocesan staff, immigration leaders, service club, professional associations, friends groups, schools, and yoga classes, to name a few. Delegation members have joined a variety of local immigration groups that provide legal services, detention hospitality, English as a second language, jobs and job training. One member has joined with Save the Children to investigate private prisons that hold unaccompanied immigrant children. The parish has responded with a sister parish forum on why Salvadorans are leaving their homeland for the US. We did a living rosary for life in all its forms on the 1-year anniversary of the Remain in Mexico policy. And this was particularly helpful in unifying our parish, including our Respect Life program, our young adults, and the social justice in our parish. And it's documented on the ISN website. We've formed a new parish committee committed to support and advocate for immigrants in our area. And our focus is on education, advocacy, and local jobs. So in the future, there's some things that we're working on, and we'd be doing more if it wasn't for the virus. We're part of the Jesuit West Faith Doing Justice Discernment Series. We're planning a 4th annual immigration summit with Seattle U and the Archdiocese. We have a border immersion delegation get together that we're planning with the Archdiocese and the Immigrant Assistance Program at the Cathedral. We're working together with the Archdiocese on a priest champion program that provides clergy to clergy resources for parishes. We're working on a DACA presentation with a local parish and prep for the release of the Supreme Court decision on DACA. And I want to give particular thanks to ISN. We were able to alert the Archdiocese to the imminent decision before they had heard about it from the US Conference of Catholic Bishops. So way to go, ISN. We have an immigration forum with another parish in the planning stage. It's a large bicultural parish near us, featuring their Congressman, Representative Adam Smith, who's the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. And we hope to do another delegation to Kino in November 2020. So I would say many of our plans are on hold as we recreate ourselves as virtual ambassadors. Being at home and disengaged from our regular work, we experience frustration. This evening, for the first time, our delegation is hosting our own Zoom call to see where we're at and what we can do in this liminal time. We remain committed to our sisters and brothers at the border. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to share.
Well, thank you so much, Vince. Thanks for sharing the ways that your parish is responding. And we're so grateful to walk with you in that journey that you make in response to those experiences of encounter there at the US-Mexico border with the Kino Border Initiative, and grateful for your continued partnership. Why don't we turn over to an opportunity for some questions with Vince, as well as and Father Sean. We have some questions from people who've posted on Facebook. And again, if you're just joining us or if you didn't catch it, you can share a question in the comment section of Facebook or post it on Twitter using the hashtag ISNLive. Joanna, we had a question about the individuals who are being deported, expedited deportation, and you talked a little bit about the situation of being deported and to a location that's kind of distant or away from infrastructure, social services, and things like that. Could you talk a little bit more? They want to know the geography of that. How far are we talking about Sonora? And could you just talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. So, we're very familiar with our geography, but it can be difficult for those of you who are elsewhere. I would actually encourage you to look up a map, though, of the Arizona-Mexico border. So we're here in Nogales. We're along the major highway that goes, there's a major highway that goes north and that goes south that connects these different towns in the state of Sonora, which is where we're in. As a crow flies, it would just be maybe 2 hours to our west that you could get to the town of Sasabe, maybe even more quickly if you were able to fly as a crow flies. But the town of Sasabe is not actually on a major road. So it's on a tiny road that then would work your way eventually to a large highway. So it's several hours by car away from us. But it also just doesn't have, as I said, it has one street. It doesn't have a migrant shelter. The closest shelter would be over an hour away. It would be going down south to Altan. And then we think that this could be happening also in another town that's even further west, that's out into the mountains, that's on the US side would be called Lukeville. And that also isn't connected to these major roads, nor does it have a large population in and of itself. And those are all towns that if you look up the US State Department warnings, those are the towns that the US State Department is telling people not to go to. Those are do not travel areas. Those are some of the most dangerous areas of the border, not like here in Nogales where we have a relative level of stability. The towns west of here are a lot less stable, and there's much more presence of organized crime. So that's another factor in addition to just the lack of resources, it's the lack of security.
Thanks, Joanna. We had a couple other questions. Somebody really wanted you just to reiterate those 3 points that you made. Rapid expulsion. They kind of said rapid expulsion, change of papers, and what was the third? Could you just bullet those three kind of key points you made earlier?
Absolutely. So rapid expulsions, the change in court dates, and then the third is the they stop processing asylum seekers at the port of entry. So nobody can turn it themselves in and ask for asylum at the port of entry.
Great. And why don't we go to Father Sean with a question here for a second. Someone asked, what can people do to help? How can they support the Kino Border Initiative, support those like Christian, who we heard from right now?
Sure. No, and that's a great question, and we've been really blessed by ongoing financial support. The great advantage of that is that we can put it where the needs are greatest, and so just very grateful to people who become monthly donors or who are making gifts. Some people for the first time. So a couple weeks ago, sent out a list of items in particular that we needed. Fortunately, we've been receiving some of those items along the way, but I can mention those. That includes Tylenol, acetaminophen, gloves, masks. Actually, some needed items as well as antibacterial gel. And some of these items are hard to obtain. Or Lysol, but also we continue to distribute diapers and detergent, and just to address those basic needs, so that people can wash their clothing, so that their babies have diapers, and so I'd say those are some of the particular in-kind items that we need right now.
And I think I heard Vince mention that there's an Amazon wish list, which might be one way. And I'm sure that financial support also would be another way to assist with those needs.
Yes, it would. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Somebody has to do it. We had another question, maybe for Joanna this time, on the advocacy front. Folks were asking, what could colleges and universities kind of institutionally do to support Kino at this time, recognizing that people are not going to be coming down to the border? It'd be very difficult for people to come, to the border right now. Are there ways that people can advocate? Are there ways that we can help people understand what's happening at the border? I mean, I open up the newspaper every day, and I need to say that I don't see the situation on the front page of the New York Times or Washington Post right now. So, what can we be doing on that front from a policy perspective, Joanna?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my favorite question to answer. So actually, on some of these recent developments, you will see that there's an ISN action alert. So if you sign up on the Ignatian Solidarity Network website to be in there to receive their action alerts, there is an action alert that's live right now to support asylum seekers at the border. So I'd really encourage you to log in, become an advocate as well for future action alerts, but also fill out that one and send it to your senators and representatives. It's very important that your senators and representatives be hearing from you, even if they're not actually in their DC offices. You can't necessarily call them but even writing emails to your senators and representatives, tagging them on social media as well. Many offices have told us, oh, our priority isn't migrants right now, we're focused on the virus. And we need to remind them that the virus is particularly affecting migrants, that those are not two separate realities. So be very persistent in that advocacy. And then I think especially, I want to talk about one resource that you can dive into, especially in this time as we finish up Lent. And it's a website that we in the Save Asylum campaign here in Tucson have developed. The artist Mick has put an incredible amount of work into it, as well as another woman named Kat Rodriguez. And what it is a website on the way of asylum. So it's the stations, it's modeled off of the Stations of the Cross, but each station is of an experience of asylum seekers. And these are different kinds of experiences of different harmful policies or pieces of the journey we've seen in recent history. But it's really meant to be a reflective source. So you'll find on the website these different postcards or different images that you can sit with and reflect with and pray with. You'll find a PowerPoint version that you can just watch, play and pray through. I'd invite you to do that with community virtually on a Zoom call or at the same time. You also find that there's a testimony section of the website, which those testimonies are all from Kino Border Initiative. They're all from people who have come to the Comedor and want to be heard about their experiences of asylum. So spend some time sitting with those, reflecting with those. And then there's an action page as well. So after you've had this time of prayerful reflection, of listening to people's voices, of thinking, where is God in the midst of this? There's also a list of ways that you can take action. And we're going to be updating that list in the coming days to reflect some of these recent developments with expulsion of asylum seekers. So I think it's really important that even though people can't visit us here at the border, there are lots of ways that we're still working to share people's stories through that Way of Asylum website, through the Kino Border Initiative's website. We have a Migrant Stories section, and also through these kinds of Facebook Lives and other material on our social media. So I'd invite you all to be attentive to that. And then, as I mentioned, be persistent advocates.
Great, thanks, Joanna. We shared images of the Way of the Asylum Seeker, the Way of Asylum, while you were speaking. And we've also posted the link to that action alert that you referenced, both on Facebook and Twitter, so that folks can take action right now. We'd love for you to use that action alert to contact your congresspeople and let them know that we can have both dignity and safety and health and all those things at the border at the same time, right? Father Sean, we got a question from someone on Facebook. They asked, can you use homemade masks?
I would say yes. I mean, it's not clear to us how long we're going to be facing the reality of the virus, and particularly here on the border. So please don't feel free to contact us about the possibility of making homemade masks. I'd say just as long as it covers the nose and the mouth, and that you can loop it over your ears, that would be the key. In fact, one of our volunteers has made homemade masks for some members of our staff, which has been great. And they've been wearing them during their service. So I would say yes, definitely.
That's great. And what another question we had was, how do you how to put this succinctly, how do you see this impacting the current pandemic, impacting the work of the Kino Border Initiative long term?
So obviously we have to find a balance, and part of that balance is just following this reality day to day and being nimble and responding accordingly. The changes I mentioned earlier, we really had to implement very quickly, and I really credit our staff in terms of coming up with great ideas about how we could continue our service, but in a way that keeps everyone safe. We obviously have to anticipate some possible scenarios. In fact, we spent a staff meeting just talking about some of these scenarios, and they closed one of the ports of entry here. I mean, it's within the realm of possibility that borders close, or that people from the US can't come into Mexico. What if the virus really spreads in a significant way in Nogales? What if one of our staff members, God forbid, gets sick? So these are certainly scenarios that I think about regularly, and I think we just have to make the best decisions we can if those scenarios become a reality. So, but it's finding that balance between really being present in day to day, but also anticipating possibilities in the future.
Thanks, Father. And Joanna, we had a question. Someone who I think is on the inside, so to speak, asked. They know that the Jesuits are very well kind of placed in terms of working with migrants throughout the region, both in Mexico and Central America. And they asked, are you hearing anything from your Jesuit partners in other parts of the region about the situation of migrants at different points or places?
Okay, absolutely. Sorry for that. I was doubly muted. We're absolutely, this has been a really interesting time in which we've been able to have more communication with our Jesuit partners in Central America because these realities are so connected. So I'd say that we're in even closer contact than we normally would be with folks in Guatemala, for example. Guatemala has been affected by, all of the Central American countries have been affected by these deportations, where there have been now confirmed cases. For example, an individual that was deported to Guatemala who was confirmed positive for COVID-19. And that's a serious concern in those countries. There's also been, in Guatemala, for example, there was a group of Haitian migrants that arrived that instead of being processed properly or given an opportunity to seek out shelter or the other kind of care they needed, they were treated as a national security threat. And that's became really a chaotic situation for a few days in Guatemala with the Haitian migrants who are arriving. There's also there's all of these different regional dynamics. We should do another webinar actually. Maybe ISN will host another Facebook Live with all these regional dynamics. The one that's very recent that I wanted people to be aware of, yesterday I think this was yesterday or the night before, there was an uprising or a protest inside of a migrant detention center in southern Mexico. That ended up, then a fire was lit, then people were trying to escape from the fire that was in the station, and the National Guard in Mexico wouldn't let them out. And so this became a really dire situation. One migrant died, several were injured. And again, all of them were being treated as these dangers to society when they were all really just asylum seekers who were desperate to get out of these very confined quarters where they were afraid that they were going to come down with the virus. So the levels of anxiety, the levels of distress have gone on the rise, and especially the issue of migrant detention centers in Mexico is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the South. So again, I think it's worthwhile to have a whole nother Facebook Live where we talk to some of our regional partners, because these are all secondhand updates that they've been sending me. But this is playing out in lots of different ways. And the last one that I would say is that Honduras is very restricted. Honduras is one of the ones that's under curfew. So you're not supposed to be out on the streets. Well, the migrants who are arriving to Honduras, whether from the South or deported Hondurans, aren't aware of that. And so there have been instances in which people have been arrested on the streets because they don't have another place to go, kind of like what Christian was talking about here in Mexico, that they're being harassed by the authorities because there's no other option for them. So there's a really important, guarding social distance, having these right regulations, but also having a space for migrants to be when they're in a situation of homelessness.
Thanks, Joanna. And again, we've been joined by Father Sean Carroll, Executive Director of the Kino Border Initiative, Joanna Williams, the Director of Education and Advocacy at Kino Border Initiative, and Vince Herberholt, who is a parishioner and a member of the Peace and Justice Commission at St. Joseph's Parish in Seattle, Washington. Father Sean, Joanna, Vince, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for this partnership in broadcasting witness from the border. We're grateful for your ongoing partnership in working for more just policies and human dignity at the border, and grateful for the ministry that you provide so many people there. So thanks so much to everyone as well for joining us. And I know there were some questions that didn't get asked. We'll try to respond to those or get you responses from folks who are with us today. and look forward to welcoming you to another witness from the border soon. Thank you so much and have a great